and welcome everybody. I hope everybody is doing well. Welcome to the Social Enterprise webinars the Irish Social Enterprise Network have been working on for the past number of months. We're delighted to have an incredible speaker here today, Siobhan Cafferty from probation and from the Irish Prison Service, and hopefully we are going to get through a little bit of some of the great work that Siobhan is doing with social enterprises here in Ireland. We are going to speak to Siobhan, but first we thought while we're waiting for people to enter, we'll go over some of the things that we have. For those of you that are familiar, that come in every week, this is every Tuesday, bar the last 2 weeks. There's been an awful lot of stuff on, so we are coming to you every Tuesday at 1 o'clock for either a webinar or for a check-in. The check-ins are an opportunity for people to log in and to maybe tell us about any issues that they're facing, and we are able to see if we can use the community to help solve some of those issues. But the webinars are on loads of different topics, and we've been running them for months. We are about to release them on YouTube, so we'll be delighted to be able to have you see them all again. Hopefully they'll be of use. These webinars are things that you have asked for, so we are hoping that you can continue to tell us what you want or what you want to see. They are bite-sized chunks. They are not huge webinars. They are just enough information for you to connect with the people that have that expertise. I would ask you when you come in that you turn your microphone on mute. And also you can turn on or turn off your video camera. This is a webinar. If you are wanting to ask questions, which hopefully you will, please use the chat box and I will be able to ask that to Siobhan at our Q&A section. So please do remember that we're recording today. So hopefully we'll be able to show this again on YouTube. A couple of other things the Irish Social Enterprise Network are doing. We have some virtual coffee clinics. Those are just a one-to-one opportunity, so we can do that over Zoom or on the phone. And with that, we've been working with Cork Social Enterprise Supports and Cork County Council and the Atlantic Social Lab, funded by Interreg Atlantic Area. And we've run a number of webinars, but we're also doing check-ins, and we're also doing clinics. So if you do have time, if you want to receive a phone call from us for 30 minutes or so, just to go through some of the areas, we normally are able to point you in the right direction for more support for things that you're dealing with. Do not forget, if you ever use Twitter, we run the Social Enterprise Twitter hour, which is hashtag SoSentIRL. It's every Wednesday at 9. So please do log on to Twitter Wednesdays. That's tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We will have some interesting conversations as we do every week. It is your opportunity to get connected and to speak with other colleagues from the social enterprise space. So we'll be delighted to have you. We also have the Buy Social website, which has received some funding. We are able to develop that. And we are very much looking forward to doing that. The question we always ask is, if you are a social enterprise and you're not on the Buy Social directory, why are you not on the Buy Social directory? It makes no sense to me. It is an opportunity to showcase what you are offering and hopefully get some sales and some notoriety for the incredible work that you're doing. Okay, based on that, we have a number of people. We are now 1304. I would like to welcome Siobhan Cafferty on the title of the talk, The Role Social Enterprises Play in the Reintegration of Former Offenders. And I'm going to ask Siobhan, are you there?
I am indeed, Chris. I'm just trying to share my screen. Thank you for the introduction. And yes, while I have this moment, I'd encourage everybody to take part in the Wednesday evening social enterprise hour. It really is a case of fastest finger first. I almost have had, like, as if I'm playing a guitar. I've got like these welts on the end of my finger from just trying to type as fast as possible, and I'm not very good at it. But if you want to see someone not be very good or very quick at responding, log on tomorrow and you'll probably see me. Yeah.
You're saying that, but you're making it sound like Russian roulette or something. It's kind of, it feels like it's a bit more dangerous than it is.
Yeah, it is actually, it's really fantastic. I would encourage anybody to do it. I mean, just even the networking and the connections alone are absolutely brilliant. But yeah, my slow touch typing really a lot to be desired. But look, I'll get started. Chris has warned me I have about 10 to 15 minutes, and anybody who's seen me speak before, that's near impossible, but I'm going to do my very best. I will say that. And please do enjoy your enjoy your lunch while you're listening to me. So yeah, I am the social enterprise project manager working with the Irish Prison and Probation Services. I suppose have a strategic role now, and have written the first social enterprise policy for the Department of Justice back in 2017. But I just thought I'd start very briefly with an overview as to how I got to that point. So for many years, I worked in the community voluntary sector. I worked with a whole range of different marginalised groups, from drug users, female single parents, early school leavers, members of the traveller community. And then my last position before taking up my current role was as manager of the Bridge Project. And the Bridge Project is based in Dublin. It's a probation funded project, and it works with adult male violent offenders post-release from prison. So it was in this role, I suppose, that I started to see that there was a commonality and the commonality between the different marginalised groups was the difficulty that they can have in getting into mainstream employment. We worked with up to 50 clients at a time, and some of them were quite successful, despite it being in a recession. They were quite successful with getting into employment. But then there was a whole group of people, really, to be honest with you, the majority of the people that we were working with, that felt it was a step too far too soon. So in having done research, basically I looked at social enterprise as a model of providing a buffer for people that they could, post-release from prison or finishing up on a probation sanction, that they could go in and be employed in a social enterprise and use that as a buffer between their past life in terms of their criminal activities, plus getting into mainstream employment. So we explored that, and fast forward now 4 years, and I'm currently now, as I said, the social enterprise project manager for the criminal justice sector. So just moving on, I suppose this is a motto that I have used for myself, for my clients, and now more recently in my current role with government ministers. And if you want things to change, you have to change how you do things. And that sounds very simple. And an awful lot of things that I do in my role, I actually believe that for me, it's joining dots. It's common sense. It's common sense approach applied to something that sometimes maybe it's risk aversion, maybe it's status quo. And if you start to change and point out things could be done differently with a much better outcome for individuals, for society, then things start to change. So this is a motto, as I said, that I've kind of lived by myself, sometimes not very well. I think if Tony Holohan was last night on TV, he'd probably want this to apply to all of us. But yeah, so this is something that I suppose has directed the work that I've been doing for quite a while. So again, just to bring it back to the criminal justice sector and the approach that is taken, it's a linear journey that people generally tend to go through. That's the design of it, that basically someone commits a crime or crimes, they get caught by the guards, they go to court, they're given punishment, either prison, custodial sentence, and or probation. And then they're released back out into the community. And that is designed, the idea is that that's rehabilitative in nature. And that's not necessarily the case. Because one of the, and I suppose you'll hear now in a few minutes as well, is that in many cases, the label, the invisible label of offender or former offender, ex-prisoner, is something that stays with someone for a long, long period of time. And I believe it's probably one of the most difficult labels to get rid of for a person. And it can stay with people and really have, I suppose, unintended consequences for their life for many, many years since the last time that they even committed their last crime. So by providing and supporting social enterprises, the Department of Justice and its agencies are providing a mechanism to support people who have a criminal record into employment, with social enterprise, as I said, being a buffer. And in many cases, it's used as a springboard to get into mainstream employment. So what purpose do WISE's, work integration social enterprises, serve for the individual? And this is why I got into it. This is very much about the individual and the impact and the desire for people to actually move on. And I saw that within Bridge. I saw that in many other places that I worked, that people really had a desire to move on, to change, to become better citizens. But because of this criminal record that they had, there was barriers left, right and centre that they found near impossible to overcome. And despite really trying their very best, sometimes their only option was to return to criminality. And I see Paul Delaney there. I'm sure he would probably agree with me on that one. So from an individual's point of view, who manages to get work in a work integration social enterprise, what does that do for them? First and foremost, it allows them to prove to themselves that they have skills and talents. And that might sound very stupid to say that they need to prove to themselves. In many cases, someone who's been through the prison system in particular, they would have done an awful lot of work in terms of the different workshops, education, second to none education resources within the prison system. But often the individual comes out not having experience of worked full time, not having experience of even applying for a job, and never having had experience of a job prior to going to prison. So they need to understand themselves that they have skills and talents that are worthy of being shown in a work environment. That then, the knock-on impact of that then is around their identity. And this is where we start to see the real social impact of employment within a social enterprise in particular. The shift that people have, and I've seen this firsthand, moving from the label of offender to employee is vast. It's absolutely vast. And I think we can never underestimate that. That then leads into self-worth. They believe that they're worthy of being employed, of giving back, of being able to move on and being able to have a different future. First and foremost, it also provides financial security. We all need a wage, in particular now in these COVID times. We all need to have that financial security. And all of these factors here lead to, as I have there in yellow, is like hope, that there is hope for the individual's future. And that's something that is a protective factor. All of those categories there, plus many more, are protective factors about people and preventing that individual from reoffending. And that's what we need to start to do. And that's the essential role that social enterprises are playing for people. It is a buffer. It's the springboard into mainstream employment. It gives them the confidence to say, yes, I'm ready for work. I'm able for work. I've proved that to myself. One of the most important things that employment in a social enterprise does for people who have a criminal record is it gives them the much needed employer to employer work reference. We all need it. Everybody needs it. If you have all of the skills and talents, all of the education that you may have achieved pre-prison, in prison, or on probation funded projects, if you don't have a recent employer work reference, it can make things difficult, that bit more difficult. So being in a social enterprise where the employer is able to give you a reference around your soft skills. Are you good at timekeeping? Are you good at working as part of a team? Do you take your own initiative? All of that type of stuff that is essential and makes a good employee. That work reference then is absolutely crucial. And what we're finding is that people with criminal records who go into social enterprises very quickly springboard out of that and into mainstream employment, where there's higher earning potential, which again becomes another protective factor against reoffending. So that, as I said, that role within social enterprises is really, really crucial for people. And then by them moving on, it's freeing up a space for someone else who's been where they've been to take up that job. So from an employer's point of view, moving it out and into the mainstream employment market, it's often, I suppose, employers overlook people with criminal records because there's an element of risk. By having the employer to employer work reference that's recent, as well as all of their CV and their skills and talents and their education, whatever it might be, it's a reduced risk. The new employer or the employer in the mainstream labour market is able to say, yeah, great, I have something here that I can stand over in this individual and I'm going to give them work. And as I said, that recent track record is absolutely vital. But overall for the system, the criminal justice system, employment, we know, is a protective factor against reoffending. Very, very few people, unfortunately, manage to get there. Now that we have social enterprises in operation, and there are, even now in COVID times, you know, there are a huge number of social enterprises who are open and are already employing people with criminal records. We're starting to see the end result. We're starting to see that people are less likely to return to prison because they have employment, because they have the financial independence that they have, because they've got that hope, and because they've actually seen that they have a future for themselves, their family, and that they don't have to return to criminal activity. So the key piece in all of this is that we now have role models. We have people who can show people in prison who are where they were 5, 6, 7 months ago, 10 months ago, 2 years ago, that actually things are different, and that by doing things differently, you can change, and you can change your trajectory. And then finally, and then we'll come to questions, and Chris is keeping an eye on my time. This year, I suppose, 2020, we don't need to say it, it has probably been the most challenging year of lived experience and lived history. And I honestly have to say that I am really, really delighted with how some social enterprises have responded to COVID overall. And with challenges, comes opportunities. And with these opportunities, there is, and in many cases, there is a shift in thinking. We have experienced and are still experiencing something. Obviously, we're now back in level 5 as in from tomorrow night. A shift in thinking about how we do things. How can we make changes? What changes have we made in the past 10 months that were impossible before? Remote working for many people was impossible. Now it's happening. Now it's mainstream. So we need to start to think, how can we shift our thinking so we can come out of this and be better than we were before? A huge amount of work is happening around social procurement. And this, I believe, is something that then supports social enterprises to flourish. And this is happening and on a grander scale than I've ever seen before. The HSE, for example, are very open to taking smaller orders for PPE from social enterprises. This is something that I'm negotiating with them now at the moment. By doing that, they are then providing much needed money for those social enterprises, where then they can increase the number of employees that they potentially have. And again, the knock-on impact on that for marginalised groups, including people with a criminal record, is absolutely vast. We need to understand what value for money means as a society, I believe, and I think that COVID is doing that for us. Every euro that we spend as an individual, we have to make sure, or we should make sure, that we're getting the best value for that money. Same goes for government departments, same goes for any public procurement officer or unit. Value for money is something that's coming to the fore now, and the social impact of every euro that they're spending, they are seeing, and increasingly seeing, I have to say, that actually they have a role to play in supporting the return of our economy, and also to make sure that no one is left behind. And then finally, and I'll end on this note, again, and all of these kind of come all together, and the shift in thinking. And if we want things to change, we have to change how we do things. It costs just over 75,000 euro for one person to be in prison for 1 year. That is just under 3.5 full-time equivalents funded through the Community Services Programme. Do we want to invest in someone being kept in prison for a year and all of the difficulties that might bring about for that individual? Or do we want to start to have a look at and see, well, how are we spending money? What does incentivized employment mean? What does it mean for the individual? And then what does that mean for the wider impact on society? So from my point of view, I have to say that the social enterprise model is growing, it's working, it's providing real employment for people who didn't have any hope. And thankfully, what we're seeing more and more so is that people are moving away from the label of offender and into employee, and thankfully, in some cases, employer. And that's really where we need to start to go. And I suppose to finish, at the end of November 20th, Minister for Justice, Minister Helen McEntee, will be launching our next social enterprise and employment strategy. It's called Working to Change, because that's exactly what we need to do. We need to work collectively for a change to come about, not just as an individual, but at every single level. And Working to Change, the social enterprise and employment strategy, is a 3-year term. It focuses on 3 different employment options for people who have a criminal record. Social enterprise, we're still going to be continuing to focus on that. We're looking at general employment. If we want employers to employ people who are deemed to be risky, we need to support them in a whole range of different ways. And we need to be able to encourage them to, I suppose, recruit from an untapped source of talent. And then finally, around entrepreneurship. There is a fine line between criminality and entrepreneurship, as we have seen with some of the most successful people in the world. We need to tap into that, and we need not to shy away from it. So they're the 3 core areas. That's being launched on November 20th, which is the day after our National Social Enterprise Conference. And we did that deliberately because we cannot do this alone. For once, the social enterprise or the criminal justice sector is looking beyond their own remit to say, we can't do this alone. We need support. We have a huge amount of support from the Department of Rural and Community Development around our social enterprises. And then my final piece is to say the social procurement is new. It's new to procurement units, but it's particularly new to social enterprises. And if we're going to be ready, if our sector is going to be ready for socially responsible public procurement when it actually takes hold, social enterprises need to be ready for that. So we will be providing training on e-tenders, taking a very basic, very small steps. What is e-tenders? How do you create an account? And how do you write competitive bids? We will be doing that training starting, I think it is the week after the 20th. I'll send out the dates and I'll give those to Chris. But effectively, we need to come at things from a different angle. That's what we've been doing. Social enterprise works for people who have criminal records and who have experienced exclusion from the mainstream labour market. And I believe that in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years, we're going to see this really kick off in a positive way. And as I said, out of every challenge comes opportunities. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and we really appreciate it, Siobhan. Honestly, you're an inspiration for us because you've really been leading this, and you've been affecting a culture change, which is not so easy amongst any group. Never mind some more institutional organizations, and I can't think of a greater institution than prisons or probations. And they've really come on that journey, and it's all because of the positivity that has been brought along. So deeply appreciate. Thank you very much. I'm also heartened by our questions. They're a little bit diverse, so we're looking for an awful lot of great answers from you here. No pressure, but if that would be good. And also we're joined by some incredible leaders in the space, and so it will be really good. If anybody else has any questions, please do put them in the chat box, and we'll get around to ask them. First, leading to one of your last points before you're talking about procurement is about the effect of COVID and how people are changing. But Paul Delaney has that question, which is, how do you think the pandemic has affected the work of these social enterprises that work with people who are coming from who are former offenders or background of criminality? So how do you think the pandemic has affected the work of those social enterprises? Like, what are the key trends that you're seeing?
Well, I'll tell you from my point of view, when the first lockdown happened, some social enterprises, like every other business, shut down, and then they really struggled to reopen, to be honest with you. And then in other cases, and I see Maggie Clune on here, PACE is an example of those organizations, as is your own one, Paul, in terms of Epic, that pivoted. They realized, actually, if we're going to actually survive this and come out the other end, still being able to support our employees and clients, we need to be able to change our business model, and we need to be able to do that fast, and we need to be able to respond. So in many cases, as I said, it's a continuum, to be honest with you, Chris, that, there's those that really struggled, and maybe their clients or employees were in a different space. And then there's those who pivoted their business. They went to online trading. They redeveloped their website. They redeveloped the products or services that they were able to provide. And in some cases, their traded income for the past 3 months has remained the same as last year, or if not slightly better. Now, that's not to say, no one is I suppose, everybody, in terms of the COVID pandemic and everything that's happened, work changes, immediate overnight, we are seeing in all of those people like mental health difficulties that were pre-existing in some cases, but are new. So the support that is needed to be provided to some employees within the social enterprises, we have to get that balance right. And that means then that, unfortunately, the traded side sometimes might take a little bit of a backseat. But I believe that we will get back to where we were. I believe that those social enterprises that did pivot their businesses and did change things, that actually they're the ones that are really going to be really strong and come out the other end. But we need to provide support to all of them at every single level.
Yeah. And I just to pick up on that, it is because it's complicated. I know I keep saying this, and it's kind of like my thing from the pandemic, but the social enterprises that close the front door and open the back door, they continue to offer the services, but they didn't charge for them because they were doing Meals on Wheels or they're doing something else to support and collaborate with other social enterprises in some instances. But there are specific needs with those who might be former offenders, because there might be an increased opportunity for learning when you come into a social enterprise that might be dissipated by a lack of technology. For example, when you have to stay at home, they may not have the internet, or they may not have the technology or whatever. And it is a different thing. It puts an awful lot of pressure on social enterprise managers to help deal with that tricky kind of balance. Is there any thing around that you've noticed, Siobhan? Or
well, I mean, I think in many cases, and the vast majority of the social enterprises that I'm working with or I'm familiar with, whether they're just providing employment to people with a criminal justice record, or a whole range of other marginalised groups, the work that they do is not the type of work that you can do at home. You know, I saw a meme at the beginning of the lockdown, and it was a sheepdog looking at a screen, you know, and it's just like, yeah, this working at home is brilliant. You know, that's, you know, we're seeing an awful lot of the social enterprises are manual labor. They are producing stuff, they're manufacturing. So that can't happen at home. So the protective factors around people not going back or slipping back into criminality or drug or alcohol misuse, you know, or mental health, or a combination of all of the above, you know, an awful lot of social enterprises, as I said, had to revert back to being really supportive to keep those people on board, to keep them on the straight and narrow. And we have to allow that flexibility. And I think, you know, those individuals were so eager, you know, to get back to work, to get back in as soon as they could in June, to get back in, to get back to a routine, because they know that that's their protective factors. So we have to, I suppose, be aware of that, which is why this whole, and then not to throw out the displacement word, but which is why this displacement word, we do need to be upfront and honest about it. The vast majority of commercial businesses would not be able to provide that level of support to the people that we are talking about. So we have to have this real, honest debate about displacement and how social enterprises should be allowed go for the same contracts as a commercial entity, because the work and the level of support that they do with individuals who need that hands-on approach at times, and in particular in times like now, that they need that. So, and that's not something that a commercial entity can provide that level about.
Absolutely. Well, I fully understand that there are a lot of debates going on about how do you become a social enterprise that's manufacturing when you can't manufacture because you can't open the facilities that would allow anybody to come to work and all the rest of it. And those are become tricky, but there are good examples of where these things have happened, and I appreciate that. Listen, I'm going to put a pin in that conversation. That's one I could explore all day. I'm going to go on to some of the other questions that I have here. Tom was asking about young persons probation services, and what sort of approaches are there, and what has been successful, and what is the potential there for areas where we're not being covered.
I'll tell you, Tom, up until this point, the previous social enterprise strategy concentrated on adult offenders. And I suppose there's a whole different approach within probation and also the prison service around younger offenders. This next strategy, we are going, I suppose, and we're pushing it, because the label of offender, it gives the impression to members of the general public that every offender is the same, and they're really not. So we've got particular needs. We've got female offenders. The number of female offenders is increasing. We have to have a particular response to them. We have to have a particular response to younger offenders, who are the most, I suppose, likely to reoffend. The recidivism rates for younger people really is shocking. So we have to have particular responses for that. Members of the traveller community, Roma community. This next strategy, we are engaging and will be engaging with all of those different groups. And we want to be able to put in targeted and specific responses to each of those groups based on their need and what they want, and how they see their future changing. Because I think sometimes what happened and what can happen is, we leave those people out. We don't give them the voice. And in many cases, and I'll say for the Working to Change strategy, I spent a long time, thankfully pre-COVID, I managed to just get in the consultations with people who are in the system. I was blown away by the responses that they gave me around how they see their future going and how they feel that these are the responses. And to be honest with you, I mean, I have to say I'm very proud of our next strategy, because I just basically took the solutions that the individuals that I spoke with who have the lived experience, I put it in strategic language. That's all I had to do, because some of the responses and the suggestions for moving forward were mind blowing. But we do need to go back. We will continue to go back and to consult with those, because one size fits all does not work.
So just on the specific thing then, Siobhan, it's so good to hear that there's a strategic approach being taken for this sort of work, and kudos to you and the team that have made this happen. I know that it's more than just one, but there's a very specific thing about youth that has always been quite tricky. And is there, given that the new strategy is coming into place, obviously there's a scope of work that has to be done. Is there any identified areas that we can be mindful of that will appear in 6 months or a year? Or
well, I suppose one of the things, if I was to name out some of the kind of most, I suppose I believe, progressive actions that I'm really keen about doing, they may not necessarily, Chris, be just for younger offenders, but they will be across the board, and they will absolutely have a positive impact on, I believe, all offenders or people who have an offending background. One of them is around, obviously, we will still continue with the Kickstart Fund. We have, thankfully, we will have round 3 of Kickstart. You're getting a little bit of a taster here now. This is a bit of a foresight into what's coming now for 2021. We don't know at this stage when that will be launched. The Kickstart Fund is going to be expanded. So we will have the same amount of money available for social enterprises and to support their development. We have created a scholarship and internship fund. And again, this is, I believe, was something that individuals, and in particular younger people, will be able to tap into. So supports that they need in order to be able to get into professional roles. And then the last one is around entrepreneurship. And again, there will be a financial assistance available. So that's the Kickstart Fund. We then will have the Department of Justice will be making a pledge around social procurement. It's one thing to be able to say we expect other government departments to do this, or we expect other public agencies to do this. They need to lead by example, and thankfully they have put a pledge in that by the end of the term of the strategy, at least 10% of all of their contracts will have a social clause in them, or will be reserved for social enterprises. So we have to, as I said, shift our thinking about just grant funding, just putting money over, but then also allowing social enterprises to become customers, or providers, should I say. So that's a big shift. And we have already made a lot of inroads into that, even though the strategy isn't launched as of yet. And then I suppose the final one is around insurance. And anybody who's worked with an individual who has a criminal record will know that at every single hand's turn, there are barriers. Again, it doesn't necessarily matter how long it's been since they had those last convictions. In the past 18 months, I've worked with a number of different individuals who've left prison, who did a huge amount of work to change their circumstances, who paid, I suppose, that they accepted their punishment, but they wanted to move on. And in those 4 cases, they wanted to set up their own business. They managed to get the equipment, they managed to do the training, they managed to get customers signed up, they managed to find locations, they managed to lease premises, and then they asked the insurance companies to come in and provide them with a quote. They provided them with a quote, very happy to take their business, but then as soon as it went to the paperwork, they had to disclose, which we would encourage, obviously, they had to disclose their criminal history, and then the quote was immediately withdrawn. So I'm working with the State's Claims Agency at the moment, and fingers crossed, all going well, we will have an underwriting scheme available to entrepreneurs who have a criminal record. They'll be able to get their insurance from the mainstream provider. That's the main thing. We don't want people to feel that they're in this bespoke scheme where the offender label sticks with them for forevermore. Everything that we're doing in this strategy, and like the previous one with the social enterprises, is to allow people to move away from that offender label. So this insurance scheme, I believe, will be a bit of a game changer for people, and it will create another option for individuals and to remove some of the barriers, so then they can move on and become active citizens, employees, employers, and contributors like you and I.
It's just an amazing piece of work, and deeply appreciate that, Siobhan. Siobhan, we have about 10 minutes left, but I've got a few questions. Michelle was just talking about a previous thing about the digital divide, and obviously there's going to be an impact there. So those that come from less able to have internet working, or have technology available to them, have got a challenge there that they have to be able to deal with, perhaps are illiterate or unable to use the technology in the same way. And so there is something to be addressed there. So I deeply appreciate you talking a little bit about that. And just a very quick hit follow on, Duncan was just talking about, in the discussions about procurement, is there an increased use of reserved contracts on the agenda? I suppose that's kind of a yes or a no, really, is it?
Yeah, no, there is, Duncan. The reserve contracts, obviously, what the prison service are doing at this very moment in time, they are reviewing all of their contracts and to see which ones would be suitable as a reserved contract. But what I would also say is that, procurement is great and that will help massively. It will be absolutely incredible if we have social enterprises in particular being able to become suppliers to the sector. But we also can't forget the lower threshold, the under 25,000 euro, and those type of contracts. They're the ones where social enterprises right now can put in for. And that's the piece that I'm saying. Like, in fact, I'm meeting with Pubble tomorrow and their senior management team, and I'm saying, don't forget those smaller tariff contracts, because they're the ones really that social enterprises can right now put in for and really emphasize the social impact of them getting that money. So I firmly believe, and I generally tend to have a positive lens on stuff, but I genuinely believe that out of COVID will come some of these changes. As I said, there is an onus and a responsibility on government departments to use public money wisely and to purchase wisely. And I think bit by bit, we are going to start to see that. It's a bit of a chicken and an egg. Who's going to go first? Who's going to do the example? Who will lead out? Who will take the risk? And to be honest with you, I'm really pushing for the Department of Justice to do that. And thankfully, they seem to be responding.
Really appreciate that. And I realize we've gone through this conversation. There is a presumed level of knowledge around procurement that we're kind of accepting here. For further information on this type of work, apart from being able to contact our organization, your organization, you are running these from the 20th of November, these opportunities for social enterprises to get engaged with the language of procurement and all of the other issues that come around that price, product promotion, and all that sort of stuff as well, which is really interesting. I have one question from Sean Mullen from Third Space around being an employer. What does it take for a person in employment to begin to see themselves as an employee rather than as an offender? And what are the things an employer can do to help that transition? And I think maybe that speaks to an awful lot of people here. It's not you're getting this job because we have specifically left that place open for being a former offender. So with them coming into that place without having that label, and then what are the things that can be done to make sure that they can either stay in that organization or move on feeling like they're an employee?
And I suppose, this is the $1 million question. And Sean, I should say thanks to you, a huge supporter of the work that I've been doing over the past number of years. I can't see, you've turned your screen off, but I will say hi to you anyway. But hi Sean. And this is the piece that we have to get right on our side. And having someone go in and for the employer to know that they're an offender, that they're giving them the opportunity. Really, in my experience, and I'm working with people over the past number of years, is it becomes normal that they are seen as the same as every other employee. Having structure, having having an awareness of where they come from, asking them and really encouraging them to speak about, or if they have a difficulty. One of the things that on our side, in the criminal justice sector side, and I know this from my experience with being in Bridge. I remember a guy went out and we managed to get him work. He did incredibly well. The employer was incredibly happy. Day 1 went by, day 2 went by, day 3 went by, and I thought, Jesus, I haven't heard. Great, it must be going all brilliant. And I rang him and I said, how are you getting on? It was about 5:05, so I knew he had finished. I said, how are you getting on? And he goes, I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm just part of the team. And I said, and that was great. And he said, yeah, great. And then I said to him, is there anything that you would change? And he said, excuse the language, everybody. He says, I'm fucking starving. And I said, why? And he goes, well, people just seem to be getting food out of somewhere. I don't know where they're getting it from. And it all of a sudden dawned on me that he had never packed his own lunch. He didn't realize that that was something that we had to do. So we have a bit of education and upskilling to do on the practical stuff, getting to work on time, knowing your bus route, what to do if your bus is late, that just because you're going to be 5-10 minutes late doesn't mean that you go, oh, sure, feck it, I'm late, I won't bother going in at all, and I'll walk away from that job. From the employer's side, it's about a recruit and retain package. And that's what we're developing now at the moment, which is, it's not just about the recruitment side and supports around that. It's about retaining someone when they're there, and what supports can we provide in order to make that as easy as possible for employers. And then some employers may not need it because the individual may not need it. And then some employers will need it. And maybe sometimes the fit may not be right. But because the fit may not be right, it doesn't mean that that person should just walk away from that job. It should be that that's a managed transition. So myself and Ayazi are working in a recruit and retain employment support package that will help people to make that transition either into social enterprise or out of social enterprise and into mainstream employment. So Siobhan, watch this space.
It's good to know that there's such incredible work going on, and our learnings from our incredible social enterprises that are on this call as well. Obviously, it's one thing to have an idea, but it's another thing to know, and you guys are the experts, and not meaning to throw it back on you guys, but obviously the more that we can work together collaboratively, the better that every outcome will be. I am realizing it's coming up to the very end, and so Siobhan, I just wanted to give an opportunity. We'll send on your details, and it's Siobhan@bridge.ie is your email. I think that's your primary point of contact. Is that correct?
Yep, that's it.
And the other thing is that there is an opportunity to engage with you and the work that you're doing over the period of the next wee while, just after the conference with the launch and with the procurement piece that's going on. Is there any other calls to action that you've got, or areas for people to be aware of, or things that are happening that you'd like to, or any points?
So yeah, over the next little while, there will be a number of things kind of coming your way, and Chris, obviously I'll be sending them through ISIN as well. So as I said, the social procurement training is going to be coming up. That's going to be 3 or 4 different sessions. It's going to be short and sharp and designed to give social enterprises a bit of a toolkit to be able to put in for procurement contracts. We'll have the launch of the strategy. And then very quickly after that, there are going to be a number of different things that I'm not privileged to say at this stage, but we'll be all working towards progressing a number of the 46 actions that are contained within that strategy. So we've a busy time ahead of us, but all really working together. And if anybody, I suppose, who's on this call who thinks that, you could assist in some way, please, by all means, just get in touch. Hashtag stronger together. It really is true. And we're seeing a lot of change. So thanks to everybody. I mean, there's so many different names there that I've seen, that I know and see and have worked with. And it can't happen without everybody.
Well, I appreciate that. Siobhan, the hashtag is SoSentIRL, and it's tomorrow at Wednesday at 9 o'clock as well, if anybody wants to go on Twitter. We're delighted to have you. Honestly, it's a pleasure. And hopefully we'll be able to invite you back if there's any updates. We might be able to go more in depth in some of the other pieces of work with the funds and other things. You've had a tremendous response here, and I'm only getting thank you messages to you. So deeply appreciate your work. And so thank you very much. There was one more question. Ray Dart from Canada was on, but he logged off again. His question was, how many social enterprises are there in Ireland? Essentially, and we'll cover that. But it was. I think maybe Danielle and Duncan can go back on that, which is good.
Yeah.
We are delighted to have you all. We deeply appreciate it. I said I'd have you away at 1:45. So from us and from Siobhan, we really appreciate it. Thank you for logging in, and we hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you.
Thanks very much, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.